Hey everyone, so we're actually here today having a look at my 2007 Honda Civic Si. Yes, I did say mine. So about 2 months ago, I needed a car and started looking around. Wasn't even remotely looking at Hondas. I'm still not entirely sure how I ended up with this car, but I have it. So it's a 2007 Civic Si sedan with right around 206,000 miles on it. So it has seen some use, it has seen more than its share of abuse. But so let's look at it today. So just bear in mind as we look at this is not a new car review. This is a well used car review. To be honest, it's way more than halfway along its lifespan. So everything's not perfect on it. There's plenty of, especially visually, there's a lot of stuff that is subpar. Mechanically, it's actually in really good shape. It's been kept up throughout its life, luckily, which is why I bought it. But you can see there are plenty of, I'm actually showing you its good side. This right here, it's raining today, but this is missing paint. There's a lot more on the other side, and it's actually had parts of it repainted. But anyways, so yeah, 2007 Civic, so this is in the 8th generation of the Civic family, and which was years 2006 through 2011. And the 8th generation Civic was actually a really big deal. I don't know, y'all probably don't remember, back middle of last decade when these started coming out and were really, the streets were absolutely crawling with them. But it was a marked departure from the boring, basic, plain Jane Civic that came before it, which is kind of what the Civic always was. This one was bigger, better, more stylish, more luxurious. It really was a sort of watershed change in the history of the Civic. And now, ever since this car has come out, now the Civic has started and really has taken over the place of the Accord as the mainstream, everyday family sedan in the Honda lineup. It didn't, for a little while after this car came out, it didn't, but now the Civic outsells the Accord. After the CR-V, it's Honda's bestseller, it's their best-selling sedan. And to sort of cement that, Honda added some new higher level trim lines when this car came out in '06. Previously, Civic line topped out at EX, which throughout history in Honda speak, EX has always sort of stood for alloy wheels and a sunroof and a little bit nicer interior. There's been other, it's been other things, like sometimes that includes ABS. These days it gets you Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and a couple other things, but it's always been alloy wheels and a sunroof. For '06, when this generation debuted, Honda added an EXL to sort of mirror what you could get on an Accord, which added leather seats, heated seats. You could add a navigation system to that if you wanted. Power seat, some things that really you kind of expect on a nicer family sedan type car that you really couldn't get on a Civic before. Additionally, so that was one, so there's sort of 3 top-of-the-line Civics for this year. One, the traditional one would have been that EXL model, basically the same as an EX, same wheels, same mechanicals, everything, just a few more interior niceties off this completely other way. For '06, Honda added, they already had the Civic Hybrid, but they really added, let you start get those nicer things on that. You could get the navigation system if you had, it's either $1,500 or $2,000 that you really didn't want. You could spend it on a small, clunky screen in your dashboard. And some of those other things, you could get that on the Civic Hybrid to go along with your green cred and fuel economy and all those things. Or you could do what whoever was kind enough to buy my car, brand new off the dealer lot, did, and get the SI, which is has some of those EXL components. It doesn't have leather seats. It doesn't have a power seat. Sure. But it does have a sunroof. It does have the EXLs, I forgot to mention earlier, the 360 watt 9-speaker stereo with a subwoofer, which is really nice. But it has a lot of upgraded performance mechanicals. Completely different engine, completely different transmission, upgraded suspension and brakes, nicer wheels, things that look better. So really got a lot of really strong performance cred with this car. But yeah, so and before this car came out, the SI for a couple of years was kind of like I think it was 02 to 05, they imported the hatchback Civic from England, but it was just like, it never sold well, it never reviewed well, people didn't really like it, it was kind of weird looking, it was just strange. So for 06 and 07, you know, Honda really decided to go back, give it everything. And it looks like it paid off. They sold a ton of these. It got reviewed absolutely like through the roof good reviews. So let's take a little bit of a look. So from this angle, you can see a couple of different things. In general, with this Civic, one of the telltales, it has this super short hood to go along with a super short, tall trunk. Or kind of the telltale. It is one of the things that made this car look so strange. From the front, like from this B pillar on forward, you know, this could easily be the front of like a small van, like a Mazda 5 or a Ford C-Max, or any of a number of things that they don't sell here. I mean, it's got the long, sloped out windshield, super short hood that just sort of falls away from the car. You can't see the hood when you're driving. So that's just a couple of things with the Civic itself. The SI, one of the big things that we get is actually these 17-inch wheels that, in my opinion, look really great. They really add to the sporting character of the car. They're not super wide, just a 215 section, 45 height wheel. And these are actually super crappy old tires on them they're like a discount, some sort of discount tire brand. But they've got about 25,000 miles on them, and I think they're already pretty much ready to go. Front of the car, it's a black 8th gen Civic. So all joking aside, there's just really not that much to the front of a Civic. You've seen 11 billion of them at this point. So, you know, the SI, the only difference with the SI is it has one of these red SI badges in the grille, and the lower front air dam is ever so slightly reshaped from a standard Civic. Not that anyone would ever notice. But that really brings us to one thing. So around back, there's a couple more changes. And I mentioned this red SI badge. So in car maker land, one of the ways that they tell you that something is supposed to be sporty is they make it red. They add some sort of red to it. So you'll see all of there's not a whole lot, but the couple of SI badges around the car are all done in red. So there's that around back to let you know what model that you got. There's also this not overly large, but definitely noticeable trunk-mounted spoiler. And it does, I'm not sure if you can see it from that angle, but it does actually have the third brake light in it here. On a standard Civic, that's actually here at the base of the back windshield. Larger finished exhaust pipe on the passenger side. Visually, that's all there really is to the back of a Civic, but there is something that I was actually really surprised about with this car, and it actually has a really great trunk. So since I've got the key out, I'll show you all the key real quick, and it does, oh, there's the camera. It does actually have a button for the trunk over here in addition to your lock and unlock. Just your standard mid-2000s Honda key, no keyless entry or anything like that here. But back onto the trunk, it's actually got a really huge opening. One of the things that has gotten really frustrating with cars recently is trunks have not gotten any smaller. They've still got the same cubic feet. And a lot of times trunks are actually bigger than they used to be. But to put stuff in them, there's like a tiny little mail slot that you have to sort of hope you can slide your stuff into. An example of that, recently I had to move a gas-powered generator to do some hurricane cleanup at my parents' house down at the coast. And I went to pick up the generator, put it in here, no problem. Took the generator out because I was actually taking my 16 Accord down to the coast to do it. So I was like, oh, okay, Accord, it's the Civic's, big sibling. Shouldn't have any problem putting it in there. Go to put it in, had to sort of shove it in there a little bit and hope I didn't break anything, because it really did not want to go in that trunk. Once I got in there, there was more space in the trunk of the Accord than there is in the Civic, but it was very enlightening just how important a large trunk opening is. And this one, I mean, you can see the cutout line is all the way back here at the edge of the car. So they really made an effort to give you as much space as possible. I don't know if you can see. The trunk itself is actually a fairly decent size. Let's move you in a little bit closer here. Oh, still hard to see. But so the trunk itself is a fairly decent size, and it has one thing that I was actually very surprised about. So I come from a long background of Hondas, but most of my family has only ever had Accords, you know, and Pilots. We've only had a couple of, well, I say a couple of, I can only ever think of one person in my family that had a Civic. So I was kind of surprised popping this trunk open to find a split folding rear seat, which is not something that you're normally, well, not something that you're normally going to find in an Accord. And it actually didn't come about in the Accord until the 2013 model year redesign, when they fully redesigned it. So in this 2007 Civic, it was kind of an interesting find, which makes it super, super easy to get stuff in there. You can actually fit some very long items in the trunk, add innuendo as you wish. But otherwise, just a standard trunk. It's really well shaped. It's, you know, it's a nice big square space. It's not got, you know, a lot of little cubbies here that, oh, let's add half a cubic foot here, let's add half a cubic foot here, and build up a big number. It's actually has fully usable space. Spare tire down here, donut spare, 16-inch donut spare. So not teeny tiny for the car, but definitely not something you want to drive on all the time. But yeah, so trunk, it was a good surprise, and further cements this as a reasonable, practical family sedan that you can use every day and haul all of your stuff in. So the engine is absolutely, well, I'd say one of the defining characteristics of this car, but it's pretty much the defining characteristic of this car. And it completely separates this one from the standard Civic line. And really, just about any other car in its class. This car, this engine is a, nope, that's in fine. It's a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder, dual overhead cam, 4 valves per cylinder, with an 8,000 RPM redline. And what that 8,000 RPM redline allows the car to do is produce 197 horsepower from just 2 liters of displacement. But to give you an idea of how exotic that is, and it really is, I think we for a long time haven't given it enough credit, that you just don't see output figures like that. In today's world, you know, with turbocharged engines, you get that, but turbochargers add power without increasing displacement. It's what they do, and there's a big, you know, they do have downsides. But for this car, it isn't quite to the level of the fabled Honda S2000, which made 240 horsepower out of its 2-liter. But even today, with the technological advancements that have happened in the past decade, you still rarely will see a naturally aspirated engine making this much power. And they're actually, instead of more and more cars doing it, it's actually less and less cars that are doing it. I think they likely had to cancel this engine for emissions reasons, because the current Civic Si that you can buy in a dealership today has increased from the 197 horsepower that this car gets to, wait for it, 205 horsepower. So we found 8 more horsepower in the ensuing decade that this car has been out. So it really is quite a masterpiece of engineering. And so there's been a lot of talk lately. So about a month or two ago, Mazda announced a big update to their Miata, the 2-seat roadster that they make. Its 2-liter engine was being upgraded from a previous 155 horsepower to now, after a thorough rework, raising the red line to 7,800 RPM, doing a whole bunch of stuff to it. Now, instead of 155 horsepower, it makes 181 horsepower. You may notice that that is slightly less than the 197 horsepower that this Honda Civic four-door family sedan was offering you from its 2 liters over a decade ago. So it really is quite an achievement, you know, quite something that still, even today, holds up as a very capable, you know, very, very noteworthy engine. I won't get into the why and how of how they got to all that. I mean, the short of it is Honda's VTEC system and its super hybrid line of 8,000 RPM allow a lot of horsepower to come from just a little bit of displacement. In addition to the engine, on this side we've got the transmission. Every single SI comes with a 6-speed manual transmission with a limited slip differential, which is kind of rare in today's market. And actually it is one thing that I will give Honda complete credit. Even today, brand new SIs are all a 6-speed manual, which is kind of cool. It gives the car a lot of credibility among car guys and girls. It probably costs them a few sales because there are fewer and fewer people that are able to drive a 6-speed manual today. But it is nice to look at. You know, I know when I see an SI, hey, there's someone else who drives a manual and not only can, but has chosen to every day in their daily driver. So it makes it kind of neat. It's that, you know, sort of car person bond thing. I don't know, it's not a real thing, but we like to pretend it is. Other than that, the engine doesn't really need a whole lot of routine maintenance. This one is actually due, so I haven't had a chance to really get up under the hood and put it up on the lift and check it out since I got it. So it's still waiting for an oil change, a clutch fluid change, brake fluid, new spark plugs, things like that. I think it's due. It's got a couple of little issues. I think it's due new spark plugs and is asking for them. This battery is old as dirt and it barely starts the car. So that's got to go before we start seeing overnight temperatures in the 20s. It's going to be fun. But yeah, haven't really done anything to it. I don't know if you can really tell from that angle. There's not a whole lot of space. Like, there's like a good 1.5 feet of room to work here, thanks to that short, tiny hood. Apparently these aren't hard to work on. We'll see. It looks like it might be kind of hard to work on, but the good thing is you shouldn't have to work on it too hard, too often. And there is not a stick of wood around for me to knock on saying that, but so far so good. We'll see how it goes. So looking inside, not too terribly exciting. It's all black on black car, but the seats on the SI are actually, I don't know if this is gonna work. The seats in the SI are actually really nice. They've got a lot of extra bolstering here, which is super useful in cornering, and they're actually extremely comfortable. There's, you know, this doesn't really jut into you or anything. It's a very nice car, even just for a highway drive. And I also want to point out, so I know I mentioned earlier that this car has 206,000 miles on it, but look at the lack of wear on this. I mean, usually at this point, this would be completely collapsed and fallen in, and it's not. It's definitely not quite as resilient as it was, and you can definitely see a little bit of wear and tear. Excuse me, but for the mileage on the car and the wear and tear, it's actually, I mean, there's very little wear here. There's just overall in the car, there's just not a lot of use. It doesn't look like a car that has that kind of mileage on it, which I think is astounding, especially considering that a lot of this material here, it is on the, if we spin around here to the door, there's a lot of Alcantara, which is like a fake suede, and it does not hold up well at all. It's a good thing it's black. It's probably the dirtiest thing on the universe, but it doesn't look, you know, it doesn't at least look bad. You can sort of see there's some shininess here where it's just worn in a little bit too much, either too worn, has too much dirt in it. I am going to be looking up to see how I could go about cleaning that, if there's a way to clean it. But then just looking in the back here, I mean, nothing really to report here other than you can see, well, you can see a headrest, the subwoofer there in the middle, betwixt the two speakers that you get with the SI, which is a nice change. Excuse me, nice upgrade. So inside here, what's come to be typical Honda, but when this car debuted, the inside was actually probably more of a shock to everyone than the outside was. And it all stems from this. It's really hard to photograph. So this dual instrument binnacle. We've got the tachometer, tripometer, and idiot lights down here. And then up top, we have our speedometer, temperature gauge, and fuel gauge. So that really threw people off. Having this second binnacle up here just did not sit well with reviewers and people at the time. It obviously didn't bother Honda customers too much. Apparently they got a little bit of just a little bit of negative reviews about it from actual customers, but it couldn't have been too bad because they kept it all the way through the 15 model year. With the 2016 Civic, they did actually get rid of that. And they went back to just your typical gauges side by side in a flat plane. I actually don't mind it. It was kind of freaky at first when I first started driving. About day 3, it was just another thing. It's actually super useful to be able to look right just about in your line of sight and see how fast you're going. So it's not something that I mind. It's one of those things you get used to with the car, good or bad. I don't see the negative to it. Of course, you'll notice again, in a standard Civic, these would just be like, bluish blue and white color. Of course, it's the SI, so it's sporty, so everything's a red and orange color. But looking around the rest of the cabin, the center stack is very straightforward. This one does have the 360 watt stereo is an upgrade, and it does come with a slightly different buttons than the base setup. The CD player here is not on a base Civic, but is on most models. XM radio is an add. I don't think it works anymore. I think it's the old analog style that you can't get activated anymore. Of course, your standard air conditioning controls. There was no automatic climate control in this generation. I really appreciate the simplicity of just your basic dial controls. It's really easy. It would be, from time to time, it would be nice to have an automatic feature, but these, I'm a little bit of a control freak and I can just tell it what to do. So that's always nice. Looking around, not a whole lot. There is good storage here. 2 deep cup holders. Oh gosh, you can't see these at all, but there are one really big cubby hole and a small cubby hole here. A power outlet, a cigarette lighter outlet that does not work on my car. And one of the great things, an auxiliary jack. So there is I have an aux cord in here hooked up. So that's great because some of these cars, mid-2000s, was sort of a transition period, and not everything has an aux jack. And some manufacturers got rid of the tape player before they added in the aux jack. So you're left with AM, FM, and CD. If you want to add in music from your phone or anything like that these days, you're relegated to one of those awful FM transmitters that never, ever, ever seem to work. So yeah, that's really glad to have that. Full power windows on this one, auto up and down on only the driver's side. Of course, power locks, power mirrors are great. Steering wheel is really great to use. Has your buttons, stereo buttons, and cruise control buttons all right here. This is a little faded, which is odd to me because this beep. I don't know why you would ever really touch this unless you're blowing the horn a lot. So that may explain. The car has a really weak, awful horn, and it doesn't just sound like it sounds small, it sounds worn. So maybe someone legit was driving around on the horn all the time. But yeah, as far as extras up here, there is a sunroof, which comes on EX and SI models. The vanity mirror here doesn't actually have a light with it, which is kind of annoying and a little bit surprising. So it's just a mirror, provide your own light source. Manual mirror. The headlights are also manual. There's no automatic headlights. There is a button up here on the dash a little cover that looks like a cover for a light sensor. So some models may have had automatic headlights. This one does not, unfortunately. So seat comfort is good. Seat adjustability is also pretty good for a car in this class. Standard, no power seat available on this model. Just the manual fore aft, manual recline, and additionally a nice find here is a manual height adjustment. Not something that you always find in this class of car, so that's extremely appreciated here. The one major omission with seat adjustability is the lumbar. There's no lumbar adjustment, which is a little bit weird with these bolsters. You would expect adjustable lumbar there. So it doesn't affect me. I still find the seat, I can find a very comfortable position in the seat, but I could see that being a problem for some people. Additionally, with adjustability, tilt and telescoping wheel. Again, not always standard in this class of car, so a very nice find when you can get one. Moving around to the back seat, even with the front seat adjusted for myself at 6'3", I've got decent space back here. My knees are just about hitting the front seat if I sit perfectly straight up, but that's actually not a problem. You can probably see there's hard plastic around the edges, but the middle of the seat back is actually fabric, so it's not uncomfortable to put your knees in the seat. There are no air conditioning vents, no power ports or anything in the back seat, but there is a fold down armrest with a double cup holder, which is a nice find. If I slip over to the passenger side, I've got the front passenger seat all the way back, and it is tight over here. I've definitely got to splay knees, but the front seat, there's no reason the seat would ever need to be this far back. So again, not a problem. And with a small amount of compromise, 4 full-size adults can easily fit in this car and ride for have comfort for a decently long trip. Alright, now for the fun part, driving. So driving is clearly what you buy this car for. There's really no reason to buy a Honda Civic Si over a standard Honda Civic unless you're buying it to drive. They're all SIs, like I mentioned. All of them have a 6-speed manual, so there's no automatic option. So if you want that, you're stuck with the regular Civic or the hybrid model. But you really get a sense for. I hate to say how good things used to be. I'm nowhere near old enough to be saying that on a regular basis. But now, like the Civic Si's successor, the one you can buy now, is turbocharged, so it's a much lower red line, much worse engine note, electronic power steering, so you don't get this wonderful communicative, direct connected steering feel. It weighs a little bit more, not much more. Luckily, manufacturers have sort of turned a corner and cars are starting to get a little bit lighter again, instead of always constantly getting heavier and heavier and heavier. But there's just not a lot on the market like this today. A car with a semi, what would be if it were larger, this would be a semi-exotic engine packaged in a 4-door family car. It really is pretty special. So a few numbers before we get into the fun part. So 197 horsepower at 7,800 RPM, only 139 pound-feet of torque. Still up there, so I think it's 6,300 RPM, which is high for a torque peak. And that was compared to, so on the standard Civic, which is a 1.8 liter engine instead of a 2 liter, we're looking at only 140 horsepower, so almost 60 horsepower more going with this car versus standard Civic, but only a 10 pound-feet of torque loss. So that car is at 128 pound-feet of torque instead of 139, because generally torque fairly well follows displacement. You can get more horsepower out of a same size engine, but it's hard to get more torque. So, and that goes away. So part part of the reason that this car makes so much horsepower out of such a small displacement is that it revs forever. It just keeps going and going and going, and you're driving along thinking, you know, oh, this has got to be somewhat close to red line. It's like, oh, it's only 5,000 RPM, plenty more to go. So yeah, revs, the three major ways to get power out of a gasoline engine: add size, you make it bigger; add a turbocharger, supercharger; or add RPMs. So this is definitely very well into the third camp. Tiny engine, no turbocharger, lots and lots of revs for performance. And it's a lot of fun. It sounds good. I hope, hopefully a little bit of that's coming through the terrible, awful microphone. And it's just an easy car to drive quickly. It lets you know exactly what it's doing. You can feel exactly how much or how little grip you have through the front tires. You can feel it through the steering wheel. You can feel the car start to smoothly break away and slide. You know, you can, it's easy to shift. Everything's just easy and natural. It feels like it was designed for hitting up your favorite back road. And it actually wants to do it. It wants you to go faster. It wants you to just put just a little bit more. Like, you know, if you were to go to do something a couple times, each time you do it, you just want to be like, gosh, it went so well last time. I could probably add a couple miles an hour this time. Brakes are okay. I think it's held back a little bit more by the woefully inadequate tires that are currently on it than by the actual brakes. And same for cornering. You can feel that the chassis has a lot more to give, but these crappy old used up cheap tires just don't have anything. I'll probably be putting some, I don't know if I'll go all the way to Michelin Pilot Super Sports on this. I'll have to look around to see what I can get a halfway decent price on, but that are actually worthwhile performance tires here in the next couple miles. You can probably hear them. They sort of whoom, 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 whoom. They thrum a lot on the interstate. They're just worthless. Sidelines out of the car are actually really good. You probably can't really tell from either of these cameras, and it's hard to tell unless you're sitting here. It has somewhat of the classic Honda low cowl, like the dashboard is really low. It's not way up here at your eyeballs, like has become the trend now with safety regulations and all that. Honda's found a way to keep the car safe, but also keep it highly visible out of it. Yes, I did just chirp the tires ever so slightly, shifting into third gear. But yeah, so visibility is great in this car. Slightly compromised at the back. The rear deck is kind of high, but the windows and your view out front is so good. A-pillars are a little bit thick. This is an early side curtain airbag setup, so that's a little bit compromised. But your direct ahead view is phenomenal. Let's see. Ride quality is not bad. It's not fantastic, but it's very livable, very composed. It doesn't crash a lot, which is nice. You know, some cars they've got a decent ride until you hit too big of a hole and then they crash. This one, oh, there's my turn. Alright, so getting back on the road, made a little bit of a wrong turn. So one of the things you may be wondering with all this talk about RPMs and crazy high RPMs and lots of high RPM power, well, how is it when you're not doing crazy high RPM? Like, is it almost undrivable? Is there enough torque, is there enough torque low in the rev range to drive around acceptably. So I'm gonna put it here. We got an open road. So we are in 4th gear, 1,000 RPM just now. And so, okay, full throttle right now. So from just 1,000 RPM in a relatively high gear, I mean, you can hear it. I mean, we're going. So now we're into the rev range. But there's plenty of torque to keep the car drivable down low. I mean, it's not gonna, you know, if you've got 2,000 RPM on the tach and mash the gas, unless you're in first, it's not gonna throw you back in your seat at all. But it will pull away, it will accelerate. I mean, and it's very tractable. It's very happy to lug around at 1,200 RPM, you know, all day if you needed to. Maybe not in 6th gear going up a hill, but you know, in a regular gear, it's fine to do that. But the real fun happens a lot higher up. And you can definitely feel the cam switch over at 5,800 RPM. So it really starts feeling like a 200 horsepower car once you get about 6,000 RPM on the tach. Going through these turns, coming out the other side, you can really feel the limited slip differential putting the power down. So not to get too technical, but in a standard open differential, all of your power goes out whichever wheel has less grip, which is not what you want at all when you're turning and trying to accelerate out of a turn. With a limited slip differential, your power goes out both wheels equally. So you're not losing a bunch of power to spinning one wheel. Oh. That light was only pink. So yeah, limited slip. And it's one of those things that they didn't have to put a limited slip in this car, but it's fantastic that Honda decided to do that because it just gives it that last little edge in, you know, in keeping it fun. You're not roasting your inside wheel, your inside tire, you know, every time you take a turn. And I just can't stress enough how connected this car and how easy it is to drive fast. I am a terrible driver, but even I can like just eyeball a corner and say, okay, I know, you know, how much brake I need, how much throttle I need, how much steering I'm gonna need. Not really much need for mid-corner corrections. It's just a super easy car to drive quickly. It sounds good. It's got plenty of power. You can floor it. You know, even stuff like this, like it's not got so much power that if you use all of your throttle, you're just going to be up in a ditch somewhere. You know, there's opportunities, not all the time. I mean, 200 horsepower it's a decently powerful car, but there are opportunities where you can actually use it all, which is fun. The gearbox, so this car is getting a little bit of wear and tear on it. 3rd gear, these cars have always had an issue with 3rd gear, even when they were new. If you didn't really shove it in there, sometimes 3rd gear would pop out a lot. Mine definitely does that. I've actually gotten to the point where I don't use 3rd a whole lot because it's starting to feel worn out. Like it does the whole, you can feel it, it sort of crunches into 3rd. So sometimes I'm just driving along, I'll just go 1st, 2nd, over to 4th. Thank you, brakes. But other than that, so the transmission problem, all these Civics, the regular ones and the SIs, the air conditioning tends to go out in them at some point. I mean, they're 10, 12-year-old cars at this point, so that's not super uncommon. This one's had air conditioning work. I have another friend with a Civic who has needed air conditioning work, and I've read up on it a little bit, and it just seems to be a common problem. Clutches, you've got to put a clutch in these somewhere after 100,000 miles. Shock, it's a manual. So this one actually made it to 160,000 miles before it needed a clutch because it had a fairly easy life, from what I'm told. And you might think, so, I mean, bombing around like this, that's not really good for the engine. But there are dozens and dozens and dozens of stories out there of people who have these every day. They're like, you know, every day I go to 8,000 RPM at least once or twice, and they've got 200 some thousand miles on the car, so they just keep going. I am far from what you would call a Honda fanboy. I'd say I've had Hondas my whole life, or been around them my whole life. I've never really found a lot that I just had to have, or really saw what all the fuss was about. But I kind of see what all the fuss is about with this car. It's just a good, I mean, the fact that it's made it this far and it's in this good a shape, I mean, they have to have gotten something right. And fingers crossed it's gonna keep going for a while longer. That would be really nice. But yeah, so they don't have a lot of problems. They just keep going. They've gotten cheap now. I mean, mine has a lot of cosmetic damage, and it is very worn out. Now, so it's got a lot of cosmetic damage, and externally, the exterior is pretty beat. These all had, that was the other thing, they all have faded paint. Hondas in general have terrible, terrible paint. These, even by Honda standards, had bad paint on them. They hadn't even released the next generation in 2012 yet, and you were already seeing 2006s with missing paint, which kind of sucks. I mean, you just bought, you maybe just finished paying off your 5-year loan on your car, and it's starting to look like crap because the paint's fading. There was a big recall on it. That's why this one had the roof and the hood painted at some point, but now the sides are starting to fade, and it's just a mess. But that you can buy one that's in this good a shape mechanically for just $3,500, and if I had any negotiating skills whatsoever, I probably could have done better, but I don't, so I didn't. But yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal how they just keep going and just keep working. It's the car that you always think about when you hear a Honda. Alright, so we're pulling onto the interstate for a minute, just to show you. So the one thing this car isn't really great at is interstate travel. It's not horrid by any stretch of the imagination, but it revs kind of high at 80. It's turning about 3,500 RPM, so it's a little buzzy. It's actually quieter at 80 than it is around 50 or 60. Those speeds are some sort of like resonance in the exhaust, so it just gets, it's probably not actually quieter, it just seems it because the engine's quieter at the faster speeds. Fuel economy is not this car's strong suit. It's rated 23 city, 31 highway, which is actually revised in 08 down to 22 city, 29 highway. Yes, we are still talking about a Honda Civic, and that's actually on premium fuel, so it's like, oh my god, that's it's really kind of bad. I've been averaging 30 in some mixed driving, and not particularly sedate mixed driving either, so I think 30, upper 20s to 30 is a good ballpark figure for what this is going to get. But again, the premium fuel really kind of sticks it to you a little bit at the pump, so that's not fun. And insurance, because I actually own this car, insurance actually isn't terrible. It's ever so slightly cheaper than my old Mercedes E-Class was, which I considered fairly average, so insurance is not bad, even though it is a high performance Honda. But yeah, so if you're in the market for a car, you don't have a lot of money, you need something kind of practical, you need something reliable, but you need something that's fun and engaging to drive at the same time, definitely check out an 8th Gen Si. There's a ton of them on the road. They made them from, well, 06 if you count the coupe, 07 to 11 for the sedan. But yeah, I've got to say, I'm much more impressed than I ever thought I would be. But thanks for tuning in. Until next time, adios.